Welcome to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome into Soccer Morning right here on WorldSoccerTalk.com, where we are covering the world's game for you each and every day. Really pumping stuff out at World Soccer Talk these days. We got the Premier League Review podcast is up and running with a bunch of very excellent people. We've got Nate doing his thing at World Soccer Talk Radio. I'm over here on Soccer Morning every day. It's quality programming. You should partake in it. Oh, wait, you're already listening to me. That's good. That's a good start. If you're listening, not listening to the other stuff, maybe consider that as well. Big show for you today on a Thursday. It's a good day to talk France, don't you think? It's a good Thursday in France. Maybe they go together. Maybe they fit very nicely. Jonathan Johnson, our friend, who covers French football, Jon_Le Gossip on Twitter, is going to join us in the next segment. We'll have a discussion with him about the first two match days of the French League season. A look at PSG, look at Monaco in the Champions League as they fell last night. We'll get to that in the headlines in a moment, so that'd be a good discussion with Michel Johnson. I'm sure they say it like Johnson or something like that. My French accent has really faded over the years. I took French in high school. Probably should have taken Spanish. All right, let's dive into those headlines because there is a lot to cover on a Thursday morning. Start our part of the world, the CONCACAF Champions League. A couple of MLS teams in action last night. One of them, the Seattle Sounders. They needed goals in the 90th and 97th minute to beat Olympia at home at CenturyLink Field. The second goal coming via a penalty scored by Brad Evans. A little bit of controversy. First of all, he took the ball off of Gonzalo Pineda. Second of all, there was a bit of trash talk. Mr. Evans didn't like the mind games that the Olympia goalkeeper was attempting to play. Decided to have a little jawing action towards that goalkeeper after he scored the penalty. The two teams cleared the benches. There may or may not have been a punch thrown at Lamar Nagel. I don't know what's going to happen with that. In the end, though, important 3 points for Seattle in that competition. Meanwhile, DC United was down in Panama, and they got a late goal of their own to beat Arabe Unido in that competition. Also, a couple of MLS games in the regular season schedule last night. San Jose went to Sporting Kansas City and destroyed SKC 5-0 at Sporting Park. Not sure exactly what happened to Sporting, but all credit to the Earthquakes as they go on the road. It scored a big win. Chris Wondolowski, with a goal in that game, becomes the first player in MLS history to score 11-plus goals in 6 straight seasons, and the fourth player to score 100 goals for a single team. He has 4 goals from his Houston Dynamo days and 100 goals from his Earthquakes days. That tells you how good he's been for the San Jose Earthquakes. Cordell Cato scored twice in that game off of good work by Shea Salinas. Benny Feilhaber sent off for a red card. Looked to be denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. I think it was a pretty straight red card, a pretty justifiable red card. So he'll be missing for Kansas City's next match. Kai Kamara scored his league-leading 18th goal. Quadwell Poku Party, hashtag Poku Party, scored twice as Columbus and NYCFC drew 2-2 in Columbus. That game was delayed an hour in about the 74th minute due to some lightning in the area. But they did get back on the field and finish it out, and it stayed 2-2. UEFA Champions League qualifiers yesterday, a rack of them. First leg matchups, Valencia taking a big 3-1 lead on aggregate against Monaco. I mentioned that. We'll talk to Jonathan Johnson about how Monaco can turn that around. Celtic 3-2 over Malmo at home. Rapid Vienna lost at home to Shakhtar Donetsk 1-0. FC Basel and Maccabi Tel Aviv drew 2-2 in Switzerland. And Skinderbu, Trevor, I don't know. Skinderbu? I mean, that sounds terrible. It's an Albanian club. They lose 2-1 to Dinamo Zagreb in the first leg of their qualifiers as well. DeMarcus Beasley and Tim Howard will be called back into the U.S. men's national team for those September friendlies against Peru and Brazil. There is an item up at ussoccer.com outlining this decision. These are the only 2 names we know so far. Of course, Tim Howard returns to the team after a full 1 year away from the U.S. men's national team on a sabbatical of sorts. And DeMarcus Beasley, who retired in December and unretired for the Gold Cup, is now completely unretired, apparently, and will play for the Americans in these two matches. You assume that Klinsmann will actually get him on the field this time because he didn't end up playing in the Gold Cup until that third-place match that the United States lost in Philadelphia. Chelsea has officially announced the signing of Pedro from Barcelona. Remember, Manchester United was in for Pedro. There's reports that Louis van Gaal changed his mind about Pedro that may be covering for the fact that Chelsea just came in and made a better bid. 30 million euros to get Pedro out of Barcelona for Chelsea. Reports say that Pedro talked to Cesc Fabregas and ultimately decided that Chelsea was where he wanted to be. Then this will probably lead to Chelsea selling Juan Cuadrado, who they just bought recently out of Italy. Miami FC owner and media rights company founder Ricardo Silva is saying he wants to create an America's Champions League. This is reported over at Soccer by Ivis, SBIsoccer.com. This would include teams from North, Central, and South America. He hopes to attract the top clubs in the Americas, offering prize money that is equivalent to that of the UEFA Champions League. This is a very interesting idea. Of course, you do have competitions like the Copa Libertadores and certainly the CONCACAF Champions League that this would somehow supersede, and I'm not sure how that would work out. The travel is an issue. Silva says that the schedule would be worked so that teams would only take intercontinental flights 2 or 3 times a year. So I'm not sure how that competition would lay out, but it is a rather intriguing idea for this part of the world. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will shift and we will talk France. Jonathan Johnson, our old friend, as we get everybody back, getting the band back together for the new season. He'll talk to us about what's going on there. It's Soccer Morning, worldsoccertalk.com.
Face in the crowd, you're talking too loud, but I can't hear you calling.
This Sunday is the Battle of DPs as Steven Gerrard, Andrea Pirlo, Giovanni Dos Santos, Frank Lampard, and Robbie Keane battle it out in a clash between the LA Galaxy and New York City FC. I'll be calling the game on Rabble.tv, and I'd like to invite you to hear my thoughts and analysis live during the 90 minutes at Rabble.tv. With Rabble, the concept is simple. All you have to do is tune into the broadcast on TV, press the mute button, and head on over to Rabble.tv to listen to the broadcast on your desktop, through your iOS app, and now through your mobile browser. You can join in, too, by posting your questions or observations in the comments section. If you have an iPhone, install the Rabble TV app and add a comment to the broadcast message board, then listen live via the app. Or why don't you create your own broadcast? Call one of your team's games. It's easy. Sign up for free today and try it out. Join me this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern for LA Galaxy versus New York City FC on Rabble.tv, where it's your team and your call. The race to win the MLS Supporters Shield and to qualify for the playoffs is heating up, so what better way to enjoy Major League Soccer than by playing one of the most unique fantasy soccer games available with Euro Fantasy League. With EuroFantasyLeague.com, don't be confused by the name. You can play MLS games for free, picking your best MLS starting 11 and subs against like-minded MLS fans such as yourself. Plus, you play in the MLS draft game just like your favorite NFL draft games. As the name suggests, you can also play a different fantasy game by selecting from 6 of the major European leagues, including the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, Ligue 1, the Dutch Eredivisie, and the Portuguese Primeira Liga. So imagine picking a team that can feature the likes of Ronaldo, Aguero, Pogba, Zlatan, Rooney, and Messi, as well as other world-class footballers, with your chance to win prizes, up to $5,000 for the winner of the season prize game. This is your opportunity to show your soccer expertise by playing against other fans from around the U.S. Set up your free fantasy soccer game today at EuroFantasyLeague.com. Again, head on over to EuroFantasyLeague.com. The race
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Here we go, Soccer Morning, talking a little France, Ligue 1, and events over there in that part of the world with Jonathan Johnson. Sorry, just a bit distracted this morning, Jonathan. I will reaffirm my attention towards French football. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm doing well. It's a little bit of a whirlwind to try to keep up with what's going on all over Europe. Once we get into the rhythm of the European schedule, it's better. But right now, there's so much happening. Of course, we've got our own schedule over here in the Americas. But we do have a couple of rounds in the books now in Ligue 1, and this is a good time to talk to you, take stock of some of the happenings. Of course, the transfer window is still open, so there's a lot of movement there. We obviously have the managerial saga at Marseille, which now that Marcelo Bielsa is gone, there's a replacement named. Let me start with PSG taking care of the Minnows this weekend and taking their spot atop the table. Is there any chance that we're going to see them relinquish that first place position anytime soon?
I'm not sure there is. I think they've made a very, very good start to the season, all things considered. PSG traditionally start the campaign very slowly. It's very rare for them to win both of their opening games. In fact, it's the first time since the 2005-2006 season that they've won 2 consecutive games at the beginning of a league term. They won three consecutive games in that season. And they're going for a third here with the trip to Montpellier tomorrow, where we might see Angel Di Maria make his PSG debut. That's to be decided at the moment. We're waiting to see if he's in the squad. But I can't see Montpellier, who are bottom of the table at the moment, really causing PSG too many problems. I think that they'll definitely have enough to take care of business, even though they played their last game on Sunday and they're already playing again on Friday. So there's not too much turnaround time for PSG's players between those 2 games. But I think that at the moment it's difficult to see them giving up top position in the next couple of weeks. Perhaps when they travel to Monaco, we'll see them run into a bit of difficulty there. I'm sure Leonardo Jardim's men will be able to pose them more problems than the likes of Lille, Gazalec, Ajaccio and Montpellier in the early part of this season. But I still think that PSG at the moment, especially if they can win that game against Monaco, are going to put themselves in a very, very strong position very early on in the campaign.
Speaking of Monaco, they draw against Lille on Friday ahead of a Champions League qualifier first leg last night, and then they lose to Valencia 3-1 in that first leg in Spain. That doesn't set them up very well for next week. Are they in a bit of trouble in terms of their Champions League campaign?
Yeah, I think they are. It's a very tough ask now to see them going through in the second leg. I think had it been 2-1, I think they would have still stood a good chance. However, the way the match unfolded, there's a controversial penalty decision that wasn't given in their favour. The second Valencia goal was, a little bit jammy, and then it was not the best third goal for Monaco to concede either. So I think it's a very tall order now for them to overcome Valencia and go through to the Champions League group stages. Looking at the positive side of things, it might be good for France to have a team like Monaco in the Europa League. It's a competition that no French team has ever won, and I think with a team as strong as Monaco, you look at the way that they went all the way to the Champions League quarterfinals last season. I think that France would really stand a good chance of winning the whole competition. I think Monaco would definitely be one of the strongest teams in the tournament, even once some of the Champions League group stage sides drop out. Yeah. However, it's not the best thing for France's coefficient ranking, so that would be a bit of a blow for them. And if Monaco fail to get into the Champions League group stages, I think that makes a couple of departures, probable before the end of this current transfer window.
What is it? Does it say anything? This is obviously luck of the draw to get Valencia, to get a Spanish side in the qualifying round. I'm looking at the results this morning from yesterday, and obviously we saw Manchester United handle Club Brugge. That to get Valencia is just got to be tough, and this doesn't necessarily say anything about the strength of Ligue 1 right now in relation to the rest of Europe.
No, I don't think it does necessarily, but obviously it is a bit of a frustration for Ligue 1 fans and certainly for Monaco. I actually think that Valencia probably looked at their draw and thought we've drawn one of the most difficult teams that we could possibly get based on their performances last season. I think that Monaco will have looked at it and thought that Valencia are a very difficult team, but I think they would have probably looked at it and also thought it could have been worse as well. There are some other sides that we perhaps didn't want to get. However, the big problem for Monaco is that although they have a lot of talent in that squad, they have a very, very good coach. They haven't spent that much time together at the moment. This is a squad that's still gelling, and because of that, it's not really the ideal time to be playing really important games like this. After only 2 league games gone in the season, because the squad is still getting to know each other. And I think that once they gel, once they strike up an understanding, this will be a very, very good side. And I think they will do well domestically, but they can also do something in Europe as well. However, I think that these Champions League qualifiers came a little bit too soon for them, and it's difficult to see them having the right level of chemistry, next week in order to take care of Valencia.
That's the challenge facing Monaco, and meanwhile, again, the league just getting underway. Looking at these other results from this last round, Lyon winners, Rennes over Montpellier. You said Montpellier at the bottom of the table. What stands out as the surprise result so far?
Looking at the way that the season has gone so far, I think you have to look at somebody like Angers, going to Montpellier on the very first day of the season, managing to win 2-0 away there. I don't think anyone really expected that from a newly promoted side. So I think that's probably one of the standout surprise results so far this season. Looking at somebody like Caen as well, up there with PSG, having won both of their games so far. I'm not sure that we'll be able to see them keeping the pace. However, they are a team who are very entertaining to watch, and they can get results in difficult places. We saw them go to Stade Velodrome and beat Marseille last season. Did it again this season on the opening day of the campaign, and that's what led to Marcelo Bielsa's famous resignation post-match. So there are a couple of surprise names up there in the upper half of the table so far, but then again, we're only 2 games in, so it is still early days.
Well, just 3 teams on maximum points, as you mentioned, Cannes, and then Stade Rennes, and they went to they beat Marseille to add insult to that first week injury, and then obviously Marcelo Bielsa leaving. They did that at home, but now Marseille trying to scramble. I don't know who is in charge for that match, but they do have a new manager, and I guess we could talk about that here. Marseille's hiring Michel, a Spaniard, to come in and take over. What do you know about him, and what does he bring to the table for Marseille?
Well, he was most recently in charge of Olympiacos in Greece. He led them to 2 Super League titles, 1 Greek Cup. He's somebody who, a number of players are quite derogatory about from their time playing underneath him. They suggest that he's more obsessed with his image, somebody who still can't really let go of the fact that he was once a very good player. And is very quick to knock down some of his star players. He prefers to be the focal point of the team in terms of the media. Doesn't really like seeing his players get any of the limelight. However, in terms of the tactics that he brings, I think he's quite a pragmatic coach. He's going to be more defensive than Marcelo Bielsa. So although the football is probably going to be less entertaining, certainly less free-flowing, and it's not going to be all-out attack. I think that we will see a more responsible Marseille team. I think that they won't be capitulating as much as they did last season in some of the games where we saw them perhaps take the lead and then falter a little bit, and the other team comes back and they end up losing those games. I don't think that Marseille will be the same as they were last term in that respect, and I think that we'll see a bit more of a balanced approach. However, there is still plenty of rebuilding to do. Michel has already come in and he's made it quite clear that he wants to bring in 2 new attackers, particularly a number 9. He's delighted with the arrival of Remy Cabella, who will play number 10 for him. I think that is a very, very good acquisition for Marseille. I think Florian Thauvin going to Newcastle. I know that Newcastle fans are very excited about his acquisition. However, I think that the best business there was actually done by Marseille, to get Cabella in return for, a large sum of money and to get rid of a potential troublemaker in Tovan as well. I think they've done, some great business there. And I think that Cabella, will help this Marseille team improve immediately.
How difficult is that a transition for Michel to come in? First of all, it's a difficult task to take over a team 2 games into a new season, and certainly to take over somebody else's team. I mean, I don't know. You can give me a sense of how much of that team was built in Bielsa's image over the time he was there. Obviously, he left in part because he didn't have the resources to get the players he wanted to do what he wanted. We know he has, as you said, the very aggressive style, and Michel comes in and maybe is more pragmatic. How does the personnel, how do the players that he has available fit into that switch of philosophy?
Well, I mean, there were players who were brought in this summer who were players that Bielsa wanted to bring in. They were on his list, and the club had started to acquire the type of player that Bielsa thought would be able to play the style of football that he wanted to get Marseille exhibiting. However, I don't think that Bielsa's stamp was really on this squad when he left. He didn't really have time to mould them after just one game in the season, and a lot of the players from last campaign who were playing under him had already left over the summer. So, I don't think that Michel will have problems in that respect. I think the biggest challenge for Michel is probably going to be something like the language barrier. He's not a French speaker, and he's going to have to, adapt to that as well as starting to get results on the pitch immediately. So that will be a challenge. However, from what I've read about him and what people have told me, he's a very good communicator. So I think, that will work in his favour. And I think that the players will be reassured by the fact that the club have moved quickly to replace Bielsa, because there were suggestions that the club were prepared to wait all the way until the first international break before naming a replacement coach. That could have seen them lose a couple more games, and for some malaise to already set in, when the season is still young. So I think that Marseille have done well to act quickly. There are question marks as to whether Michel is the right man for the job. But however, I think that considering the drama of the Bielsa reign before him, I think a coach of Michel's caliber is the right appointment for Marseille at this time.
You talked a little bit about that player swap there, Newcastle and Marseille, and what it brings potentially to Marseille and Cabella. Where else are the transfer rumors sitting right now? I mean, certainly I'm seeing, you mentioned that Chelsea is sort of raiding French coffers or French cupboards for some players. Perhaps some players come the other direction as well, but it remains to be seen. Who right now is the name most bandied about as potentially making a move somewhere?
Interestingly, both names that I'm going to mention are Monaco players. One of them, Layvin Kurzawa, has been linked with a move to Paris Saint-Germain, also been linked with the likes of Manchester City and Juventus in recent weeks, Atletico Madrid as well. It looks like PSG are closest to completing a deal for him at the moment. We'll have to wait and see whether they can meet Monaco's asking price. But, as I said earlier, if Monaco go out of the Champions League, then perhaps I don't think it'll force their hand, but however it might, force a couple of players or, convince a couple of players in the squad that, now is the time to make the move. If Kurzawa was to leave Monaco, he'd be able to play Champions League football with PSG. So, that perhaps appeals to him. But perhaps the most interesting rumour out there at the moment is the one that surfaced earlier today from Spain, that Chelsea have put an offer on the table for Anthony Martial of Monaco, 55 million euros. Now, that is big money for somebody who's not even turned 20 yet. He's a very talented player, very Thierry Henry-esque for anybody who's ever watched him play. I'm sure many people would have been impressed with him against Valencia, despite the fact that Monaco lost the game. And if the offer is true, I think that there's no way that Monaco are going to be turning that down. It would be a big shame to see him leave Ligue 1, but that would be a huge move for Martial. I'm not convinced it would be the right one. I think that he would definitely benefit from having at least one more season under Jardim in France with Monaco, if not more. However, when that sort of money is put on the table, even a big Ligue 1 side, is not really going to be able to refuse that, and certainly Monaco, who seem to be developing this image, this reputation of theirs as sort of France's answer to Porto. as transfer market kings. And if they were to sell Anthony Martial for 55 million euros, a player who they spent little over 5 million euros on, that would certainly contribute towards their reputation.
How do you view the balance of power when it comes to spending in Europe right now? I mean, clearly, the top teams in England have pretty much unlimited resources in a lot of cases. If they want to go buy a player, they can go buy a player. In this case, Martial at 55 million, as you said, an offer that's almost impossible to turn down. But we also have, other smaller, mid-table, lower half English Premier League teams with spending power that outstrips, I would imagine, nearly everyone in France, bar 2 or 3 clubs. How does that change things for French teams when it comes to the transfer market?
Oh, it changes things absolutely massively. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't even think that it's 2 or 3 teams who can compete with Premier League prices. I think realistically it's only 1, maybe 2. Monaco do have that money, so they are able to bring in those kinds of players. But we already saw Lyon being blown out of the water by Aston Villa for Jordan Amavi in the summer. So Lyon aren't even able to really compete with the Premier League pricing. And it has reached, I feel, a ridiculous level this summer. You look at some of the transfers that have been made. I mean, Martial, again, that's another example, 55 million euros. I mean, it's an absolutely, eye-watering amount of money. But then you look at, the likes of Jordan Ayew as well, going for nearly 20 million euros to Aston Villa, a player who, in my honest opinion, is not even worth half of that. Jordan Amavi as well, fantastic talent of the year. Villa paid big money for him. And Newcastle as well, shelling out nearly 20 million for Florian Thauvin. Another very big risk, but it just seems like, for Premier League sides, money is no object now.
Absolutely. It doesn't seem that that's the case. I mean, there are some other rumors here that I feel like we need to address. Jonathan, you can tell me whether you put any stock in them. Just a quick scan. I'm seeing things about Willian perhaps going to PSG. Obviously, they just signed Pedro, and there's a question over whether or not he becomes surplus, although, I think he's a good enough player to make a claim for time under Jose Mourinho. Alexander Lacazette in the rumor mill as well for Chelsea. Who else is potentially? Do you put any stock in these rumors? Let's say it that way.
In the Willian rumours, no, I don't. For PSG, because PSG are limited to having 4 non-European players, so basically, players who don't hold a European passport, they're already at the maximum of their quota, so they won't be able to bring in a player like Willian who doesn't possess a European passport. So, right. That's a non-starter rumour for me, and I can't see PSG moving somebody out of their squad at this late stage in the transfer window in order to bring him in. Perhaps that's one for next summer if Willian is still there at the club, but that rumour also suggested that Chelsea have offered him to Bayern Munich as well as PSG. Perhaps a move to Bayern Munich might be more feasible for him. However, I'm not sure that he's a player that Pep Guardiola needs right now. So, for me, the Willian transfer in particular, I don't put too much stock in that. Okay,
fair enough. We're a couple of rounds into the season. You're going to see, a separation happen, I imagine, fairly quickly. When we talk about where the storylines are this year beyond whether or not PSG can claim the title again, which I think is the expectation, whether or not Monaco can maintain. Certainly next week we'll say a lot about their season as they go into the second leg against Valencia at home. Where else? I mean, Marseille and the transfer and the change in manager. Where else are the stories that you're watching, at least as we begin the first month or so of the season?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of interesting stories. When you look at the teams that are competing in Europe at the moment, it's absolutely imperative that Lyon pick up points as early as possible before they go into the Champions League group stages, because I think that they're going to struggle to balance both domestic and continental competition. I think that Monaco, whether in the Champions League or the Europa League, by the time the group stages get underway, I think that they have a deeper squad than Lyon. However, I still think that they will struggle, with the rigors of both domestic and continental competition. And then you look at the teams in the Europa League, particularly the likes of Saint-Etienne, Bordeaux. I think those are teams who would normally be up in the top half of the table. Certainly Saint-Etienne, normally challenging for European qualification, even pushing for Champions League. And I think that they're really going to struggle this season, with a potentially prolonged continental campaign. However, it's important for Ligue 1, for French football, for the French teams to go far in Europe. So, fingers crossed that almost all of the French teams get through to the group stages, whether it's in the Champions League or the Europa League, and they give a good account of themselves. It's important, but at the same time, on the domestic front, that weakens them and that opens it up to, a couple of surprise packages to perhaps finish in the top half of the table and start looking towards European qualification. So, that's certainly one of the big storylines that I'm looking at in the early part of the season. Just who out of those European qualifiers are already starting to struggle with trying to balance, their European games and their domestic ones. Saint-Etienne haven't made the best start to the season so far, so it seems like they're already suffering.
The draw for the group stage of this year's Champions League happens a week from today, as a matter of fact, in Monaco. Obviously, you're hoping for a fairly easy draw, but there's some difficult possibilities out there certainly for PSG and for Lyon, and we wait on Monaco. Do you see? I mean, without knowing exactly who they're going to get, is this going to be a problem for PSG in the group stage? I mean, Lyon more trouble balancing two fronts, but PSG has certainly made it their goal not only to win Ligue 1 consistently, which they've done, but also progress and do what you said that no French team has ever done, win the competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that PSG won't really, be too afraid of getting handed a difficult group. I think that there's going to be more teams fearing being drawn in the same group as PSG than there will be, PSG fearing being drawn in a group with one of these bigger teams that's going to go into one of the lower pots. I think that PSG will have enough quality to finish top, and at the very least, finish second in their group. I think that they're more likely to avoid a big side. They managed to draw Barcelona last season. I'm not sure we'll see that repeated again this term, but of course, we don't know who they're going to be drawn against yet. So they could end up in a group of death. But I think that even in a potential group of death scenario, I still think that PSG would fancy their ability to come out as one of the top two teams in the group. I don't think there's many teams at the moment that PSG are really afraid of. I mean, okay, it was it was only a pre-season tournament, but you look at the way that they played in the International Cup. You look at the way they rotated some of their youngsters. And they still managed to beat big teams like Manchester United. Drawing with Chelsea. They won the International Champions Cup overall, and although it means nothing really, it shows that the team was already ready even in pre-season for a big campaign. So I think that the players have had it drummed into them since the first day of pre-season training that their absolute minimum this season is that they have to go past the quarterfinals of the Champions League this time, aim for the semi-finals, perhaps even do better than that. And I think that their season will be geared around succeeding in the Champions League. So I think that we will see them put extra emphasis on their Champions League group stage games, whether it's against difficult opponents or whether their group draw is slightly more favourable.
Obviously, the ability of PSG to outspend every single one of its rivals in France puts them in a league apart. And I talked about Germany yesterday with Ross Dunbar, and we talked about the Bundesliga as it is right now. A very competitive league from top to bottom, except for the fact that Bayern Munich's going to win the title. And everybody just believes that that's going to be the case. There's no reason to doubt it. They'd have to really trip over themselves not to do it. And I imagine that the feeling is somewhat the same in France. Although maybe the gap is not nearly as wide. Is that good ultimately for French football at this point, Jonathan? And does the competitive level of Ligue 1, and I don't mean it relative to the Bundesliga or the Premier League, just within the league, is it strong enough to keep people interested in a competition that is a fait accompli in terms of the champion?
Yeah, I mean, it essentially is pre-decided already. I think many people assume that PSG will win the title. I certainly think that they will win the title this season. And I think that they will probably do it by a larger margin than they ever have done in the past before. But I think that people don't give Ligue 1 enough respect for being a competitive league. I mean, okay, yes, the title is now, essentially decided before it even starts with PSG, barring a massive collapse, potential disaster with injuries or, major complacency. But otherwise, Ligue 1 is still a very competitive league. You look at the battle for European qualification, whether it's Europa League or Champions League, battle to avoid relegation as well, and it is extremely close in many cases, and often goes up until the final day of the season. So there is still plenty of excitement outside of PSG and Ligue 1. I have to say, talking about the Bundesliga, you're looking at Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich have mastered, dominating the domestic scene in Germany, whereas PSG, although they completed the first ever clean sweep in French football history last season, they still haven't really, gotten to the same level of dominance as a Bayern Munich. They don't destroy teams, sort of 4-5, 6-0 week in, week out, as Bayern seem to do more often than not. PSG had a few of those results towards the end of last season, but we don't see enough of those performances over the course of the season. However, I do feel that there were factors that stopped PSG from playing at the peak of their ability last season, certainly in the first half of the campaign. And I think that this season it will be a different story. So I expect to see more of those, comprehensive victories as the campaign stretches on. But I don't think that. I think that people, need PSG to sort of be lured in to watch Ligue 1, but I don't feel that should be the case, as I still think there is plenty of fantastic football that gets played outside of PSG. Some teams, even around mid-table who play some very attractive football, and it just takes a bit of time to sit down and watch them, to be able to appreciate that. But, unless PSG are playing that team, it seems like many people, won't really be sort of, lured in to watch a game like that. So, I think that once people actually pay a bit of attention to Ligue 1, it becomes obvious very quickly, that there is still quite a bit of competition in there, even if, the champion overall seems to have been decided even before the first ball gets kicked.
There you go, with Jonathan Johnson telling you why you should watch French football. I'm not sure how much is available to us over here, Jonathan, but it's certainly a league we should keep our eyes on. Jonathan Johnson, JON_LaGossip on Twitter. Go follow him. He covers French football for many an outlet, and he does an excellent job. And it's good to have him back in the fold regularly now, talking French football this season. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I'll speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will talk to you. Phone lines will be open. Some interesting comments from Seamus O'Brien. He is the president of the New York Cosmos. He's talking NASL. We can get into that. Soccer Morning, WorldSoccerTalk.com. This Sunday is the Battle of DPs as Steven Gerrard, Andrea Pirlo, Giovanni Dos Santos, Frank Lampard, and Robbie Keane battle it out in a clash between the LA Galaxy and New York City FC. I'll be calling the game on Rabble.tv, and I'd like to invite you to hear my thoughts and analysis live during the 90 minutes at Rabble.tv. With Rabble, the concept is simple. All you have to do is tune into the broadcast on TV, press the mute button, and head on over to Rabble.tv to listen to the broadcast on your desktop, through your iOS app, and now through your mobile browser. You can join in, too, by posting your questions or observations in the comments section. If you have an iPhone, install the Rabble TV app and add a comment to the broadcast message board, then listen live via the app. Or why don't you create your own broadcast? Call one of your team's games. It's easy. Sign up for free today and try it out. Join me this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern for LA Galaxy versus New York City FC on Rabble.tv, where it's your team and your call. The race to win the MLS Supporters Shield and to qualify for the playoffs is heating up, so what better way to enjoy Major League Soccer than by playing one of the most unique fantasy soccer games available with Euro Fantasy League. With EuroFantasyLeague.com, don't be confused by the name. You can play MLS games for free, picking your best MLS starting 11 and subs against like-minded MLS fans such as yourself. Plus, you play in the MLS draft game just like your favorite NFL draft games. As the name suggests, you can also play a different fantasy game by selecting from 6 of the major European leagues, including the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, Ligue 1, the Dutch Eredivisie, and the Portuguese Primeira Liga. So imagine picking a team that can feature the likes of Ronaldo, Aguero, Pogba, Zlatan, Rooney, and Messi, as well as other world-class footballers, with your chance to win prizes, up to $5,000 for the winner of the season prize game. This is your opportunity to show your soccer expertise by playing against other fans from around the U.S. Set up your free fantasy soccer game today at EuroFantasyLeague.com. Again, Head on over to EuroFantasyLeague.com.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
We are back on Soccer Morning. It is a Thursday show. Our phone lines are giving us trouble, but they should be working. I mean, they're giving us trouble in the sense that they're not working perfectly, but they should be working a little bit. And if they're working a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and open them up. This is a little bit dangerous on my end, but I'm going to do it. 646-832-3909. If you have thoughts, concerns, questions on anything that's happened over the last 24 hours or beyond, the call-ups of DeMarcus Beasley, Tim Howard is in the news. Those are things in the news. Jurgen Klinsmann. I said this on Twitter. I went to the U.S. soccer page where the story was up about Tim Howard and DeMarcus Beasley being called into the national team. And U.S. Soccer had decided to embed 2 different videos of Jurgen Klinsmann talking about these players. Probably one about Howard and one about Beasley, and that's great. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But then they both started playing automatically without me choosing which one to watch, and then I got double Klinsmann coming, and my brain just started to like spin for a couple of minutes before I was able to actually go and click them off. Stop with the autoplay, people. Just stop autoplay. It is a scourge. It is a scourge that must be stopped. We also have comments in the news. The Guardian has a piece up, interview with Seamus O'Brien, who's the man in charge of the New York Cosmos. He's got some interesting things to say. Let's go to the phones. These are going to be unscreened. Yes, unscreened calls. I can't believe I'm telling you people that. 203, you're on the air.
It is working indeed.
What'd you say? And I can't hear you now. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I said it's actually working.
Oh, the phones are working. I'm just doing this without a net. There's no screener today. Trevor's system is giving him problems. So that means you people are not going. I'm not going to be able to tell you who you are before you're on the air. This is old school a little bit for Soccer Morning. What's up with you today? Go ahead.
Throwback Thursday, anyway.
Yeah, that's right. What's on your mind?
On my mind is I think the Pedro signing is a bit weird because, in theory, I don't see why Chelsea would want a player. I don't know if they need a player like him, considering they have players like Hazard, William, Cuadrado. You know, if anything, they need more of a center attacking mid to maybe be an understudy for Oscar. You know.
I see what you're saying. I mean, certainly that it seems to be there's a lot of wide options in this team now. But Jose Mourinho is the kind of guy. I mean, if you get the sense now. And, I don't know. You get the sense that he's sort of just collecting pieces, but they're not necessarily towards an end. They're sort of what's available. And the element of Chelsea coming in on top of Manchester United to grab Pedro is a different, it sort of throws a wrinkle in it too, because you can almost imagine this as Mourinho getting one over on United in addition to adding a quality player. But yeah, as you said, someone who may not fit in exactly with a team that has all of those options you mentioned.
Exactly. But and this is probably a repeating situation that has happened for Barcelona and the Premier League for that matter. You see players that left Barcelona who weren't exactly fitting in at their club, like you mentioned Fabregas and Alexis Sanchez, who've done brilliant for their respective clubs last season. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what was the point there? I thought there was more going to be. You're going to have some more for me. What was that?
The point is that a lot of Barcelona players who weren't fitting in well for their club
I see.
Went out to the Premier League and did well there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, well, not of course. I mean, I don't know. It's there was always. I thought there was always a concern about for some foreign players, not all, but some foreign players, especially ones who coming from a place like Spain. Occasionally, they have issues adjusting to the Premier League. Not always, but occasionally, and that didn't seem to be the case for a lot of guys. Now, obviously, you had. Like Fabregas going back to the Premier League after being at Arsenal. Alexis Sanchez. I mean, look, quality is quality, right? And for Barcelona is so specific about how they want to play. I know it's a little different now, as opposed to the way it was under Pep Guardiola. It's not the same exact sort of style, but they're so specific about the way they want to play that maybe there's an additional element of freedom. Maybe there's just the ability to I don't know, to run. I mean, but Barcelona is not necessarily about vertical speed. You have a player like Alexis Sanchez who can utilize that more often in the Premier League. That's probably going to be beneficial to him.
Absolutely, and it's only time will tell. Time will tell, Jason.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating observation. I appreciate the call, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day.
There you go. 646-832-3909. Yeah, these are unscreened. You want to jump in and talk about whatever's on your mind, go ahead and do that. We can touch on these comments from Seamus O'Brien. I haven't actually read the entire article. It popped up while I was doing the show, and I can only do so many things at once. But Jack Williams, in an interview with Seamus O'Brien, this is the takeaway quote, I think. This is the one that people are going to be looking at and talking about. I hope they read the entire story for some context. I'm not sure there's a lot extra needed to be said, but here's the quote. What do I think we will look like in, say, 5 years' time? I think we will be playing in our own stadium in a league of 18 to 20 teams, and we will be competing at the highest level in this country. Now, there's nothing new about those sentiments from an NASL perspective, and certainly from a New York Cosmos perspective. But it does bring up the question as to whether it's possible, whether or not the NASL can reach that level, whether or not they can challenge MLS for the top spot, the top division, the best soccer in the country. Now, they could play better soccer and not necessarily have first division status. That's conveyed upon conveyed by U.S. Soccer, not necessarily tied to the quality of the play. If U.S. Soccer chooses, that is a rather subjective sort of take is how good the play is in comparison to MLS. But there's a lot to be done. 5 years is not long. 5 years is a very short time frame. MLS went from launching in 1996, getting big crowds in football stadiums with teams dressed in ugly kits, to 2001 where they had to kill off 2 teams. They have gone since then in 5-year increments. 2006, okay, that's just prior to the David Beckham arrival. That was a league that was improving but not moving rapidly. Certainly not adding teams year over year the way they are now. 2011, 5 years later, that's a full 15 years in. And now here we are 20 years in. And MLS is just now to the point where you could argue, first of all, they're just now to the point with 20 teams. This is 20 years in. MLS now has 20 teams. Took them that long. NASL has been around for 4 years? So in less than a decade, NASL, according to Seamus O'Brien, can go all the way to 20 teams, 18 to 20, and be playing in their own stadium. And they need those other teams, all of those other NASL teams, to be playing in their own venues as well. Now, I don't know that there is anything that says NASL can't reach this target. I think it's a little over the top to be claiming those things right now, but you want to set out aspirations, especially if you're going to grab fan attention. MLS has made an art form out of this. We're going to be one of the best teams, one of the best leagues in the world by 2022. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to challenge for continental titles. We're going to do all of these things. They make big statements because it grabs attention. And if you set your timeline out far enough, people aren't going to call you on it in that moment because they don't know what's going to happen, can't predict the future. And by the time we get to 5 years from now, people will either have forgotten what Seamus O'Brien said, or NASL will be in a position that it's either a disaster and no one will be worried about it because we have other concerns, or a raging success enough that even if they haven't met these standards, there'll be plenty to talk about and plenty of praise to throw around. This is a country, and I've talked about the structure or lack thereof here before, and we talked yesterday about player development over on SiriusXM FC. It's upside down. Everything is upside down. Everything started the wrong way around. We didn't go from professional clubs, now we need players, let's start our own youth teams and academy teams, and okay, now we're getting kids out from the local area, and now the game's international, now we're scared. No, this country, despite the fact that we had several leagues that came and went, started the other way around. Before we ever had established professional clubs that wanted to breed young talent, we had youth clubs whose job it was to get kids out on the weekend to play games and have fun. Then it became, now let's win some games. And now we're charging money in big amounts. And now you can go to college on a soccer scholarship. So let's make those kids better for that reason. Now professional teams are involved. Now they want to link up somehow with all of this. And what has led to is a very open, in a certain way, sort of capitalistic idea about what you are allowed to do within the soccer structure of the United States. Whereas a top-down control model took over in most countries. Nowadays, especially the more established ones, the countries that have been playing soccer at a high level for 100 years. In the United States, more Wild West, more open. If you want to throw a bunch of money at a soccer league, you are free to do so. Now, of course, U.S. Soccer has to give you some.
Hey,
Go ahead. Who's this?
hey, this is Joseph from Nova.
What's going on, man?
I just wanted to talk about, like, I just don't think it's possible for NASL to ever really make a big splash in U.S. soccer when teams that play in NASL are constantly constantly picked up by MLS. And
That's a
like,
problem.
You know, they keep doing that with like Man United.
Yeah.
And other lower level leagues.
It's definitely a problem for NASL to have to deal with MLS poaching their best teams. They need to stem that tide before they even begin to talk about how they're going to challenge MLS. I don't know how they do that because of MLS's established nature, because of the television contracts, because just the sense that they are the top division, because that's what that's the sanctioning they have, and that's the image that they have. And again, they've been doing it for so much longer. Teams are generally speaking going to want to go to MLS. They're not going to want to. Their end game isn't going to be NASL unless they have been around for long enough that they sort of put to bed any notion of trying to get to MLS, or they recognize that their market is not appropriate for MLS, and MLS is unlikely to look in their direction. And I don't know what they do about that. It's a good point.
Yeah, I think what's really important is to see how NASL ends up competing in like the U.S. Open Cup, because like that's really the only chance NASL teams really get to directly compete against, you know, MLS side. And I think that like their performance, you know, except for the Cosmos, like we didn't really see anything interesting this year. And I don't know if you'll ever see that in the future. And like I think that'll be just a pretty good indicator in terms of NASL quality over the next 10 years.
Well, it fascinates me about Seamus O'Brien and some of these statements, and then some of the things that are being done with the Cosmos, or at least their aspirations in relation to the rest of the league. I just don't get how you could have one team that is so far beyond everybody else in terms of profile and the stadium they want to build. If the New York Cosmos get their stadium built at Belmont and they haven't heard anything and they're frustrated and it may not happen, but let's imagine that everything went smoothly and they got it done. You're telling me that having a 25, 30,000 seat stadium for a second division team is good for that second division when everybody else is playing in 10,000 seat stadiums that are basically erector sets that are essentially a bunch of bleachers around a patch of grass? I don't know that that's a good thing.
Exactly. Like, and I totally agree with you there. I think like that's the ultimate problem that NASL is going to have. So you're going to have this one team that is going to be just so far and above the rest of the competition, and I don't think there's anything else that's ever really going to come close to them. Yeah. And you know, even when you have the U.S. Open Cup having like the Champions League spot, like even then you don't see NASL teams, you know, putting, you know, 110% out there to try to beat like what amounts to reserve MLS squads that play in the
well,
early
I think some of them are trying. I just don't think that they've been successful yet. And that may be
Sure.
about the difference in quality and the difference in depth, but it also just sometimes it's luck of the draw. I mean, the Cosmos last year felt like they got screwed out of advancing in the Open Cup when they lost to Philadelphia at PPL Park. And this feeds some people's notions of a conspiracy and that MLS is dictating terms for soccer for the rest of the country. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case. When we're talking about the ability of the Cosmos to outspend, outmarket nearly everybody else in that league, keep in mind that just because Seamus O'Brien says something or just because Bill Peterson says something, and remember, it's Bill Peterson's job, just like it's Don Garber's job, to boost his league, to be a cheerleader, to talk about how the sky is the limit for us. Otherwise, he's not selling. He's essentially a salesman. When Seamus O'Brien or Bill Peterson talk, that's one thing. But there's a lot of owners in NASL, just like there's some owners in MLS who aren't necessarily on board with spending. Let's just go out and throw a bunch of money at this problem so we can challenge MLS in 5 years. That's not something that they're looking at their bottom line going, yeah, we want to do that. Where's this millions coming from?
Do you ever think that there's a opportunity for NASL in any time in the future to ever work directly with MLS to incorporate, a multi-league, pro relegation system?
In terms of pro,
do you think that could ever happen?
In terms of pro rel, I don't want to say ever. I don't like that. I think that we could get there in another generation. That we could have a turnover in terms of ownership or people who are more open to the idea, and we could see pro rel happen in another generation. In terms of MLS working directly with NASL, it's not going to happen while you have the current NASL leadership. It's not going to happen while you have the Cosmos in place with their notions of what they want to do and the freedom that NASL allows them. Remember, because that's the fundamental difference here. You're square peg, round hole. Single entity versus not single entity. Even if NASL isn't spending anywhere near the amount of money MLS is, they still operate in a very different manner. That's always going to be a problem linking those two things up as long as MLS hangs on to single entity. I don't think Pro Rel is in the offing anytime soon. There was actually a time when MLS was talking or had tried to broach a potential partnership with NASL, but NASL didn't want to play second fiddle to MLS. And therein lies the fundamental problem with American soccer. You know, again, these things in England and Italy and Spain and France, they sort of coalesced of their own, on their own, sort of naturally. They didn't have a bunch of people leading a charge with this business-minded attitude about we're going to challenge this and we're going to challenge that. Teams just sort of settled into their natural positions, and the biggest clubs at the time in the 20s, 30s, even before that in some places, decided to be the top division, and everybody else sort of got in line and waited their turn. That's not going to happen here because you've got an environment where everybody believes they're competing against everybody else. There was no natural progression from first division to second division and the size of clubs and built-in fan bases. Everybody's starting soon enough that they imagine themselves to be capable of challenging the best. It's a very messy thing, and more than me saying it's good, bad, or being indifferent about it, I'm just pointing it out because it's going to be a fundamental problem when we talk about the relationships between any leagues in this country, much less MLS and NASL. Right?
Yeah, right. And like that totally makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I was just one other thing I wanted to add is, what do you think it will take for MLS sides to take the Champions League seriously in terms of putting like first teamers out there and putting like their best forward to compete really well in that competition to finally get the first MLS champion in that competition?
I'm going to say money. The money needs to be bigger. And I'm going to say that only if MLS coaches have their jobs hinging on a Champions League campaign is it going to matter. And because that's ultimately they're the ones who decide what kind of team to put out. It's Bruce Arena's call how strong that 11 is going to be when he plays in the Champions League. And if Bruce Arena's job is more hinging on the Champions League than on MLS Cup, or they're equal in terms of what the club wants to do, then maybe he puts out the strongest team possible. Now, he's got difficult decisions because depth is depth. He can't do anything about it. He doesn't want to burn out his best players. But right now, the only thing that matters to owners is an MLS Cup. That's the only thing that matters. That's the only reason you get fired, is if you're not anywhere close to expectations in chasing an MLS Cup. I've never heard of an MLS coach get fired or have his job brought into question because, we didn't have a good Champions League campaign. So
is the Club World Cup spot where like you could compete against like Barcelona or like world powers like that isn't alluring enough to them?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the MLS HQ values that immensely because of the stage it represents for the league, and they're obviously in the business of selling the league as a whole. But I don't think the individual clubs necessarily care. I mean, they'd love to, but they're not going to go out of their way to try to get there. And even if they do, nobody thinks of the Club World Cup as a major competition. Now, Real Madrid took it very seriously. Maybe that means something the next time around, or when we get to MLS actually competing, maybe by then it will mean something. But for the time being, it's always in this sort of out of the way place, or on the other side of the world from where we are in the West, or it's just viewed as sort of a distraction from other things for these teams like Chelsea, Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona. They take the trip. It's always in the middle of their season. They've got other things going on. They play weekend sides generally. Again, Real Madrid didn't, but I don't know how you make that. I mean, the same thing is, how do you make the CONCACAF Champions League matter more? How do you make the Club World Cup matter more? Is it just a matter of time?
Yeah.
Is it always going to be second fiddle because of the other competitions that exist? And this I think is a major thing for the Champions League in this part of the world, because of the UEFA Champions League and to a lesser extent Copa Lib. CONCACAF's version is always going to look rinky-dink and minor league. And because we can see everything, and especially the UEFA Champions League, we naturally compare these two things in our heads and go, well, what that's there's like 12 people there. The field is a disaster. I've never heard of this team from Guatemala. Why do I care? And that's again in relation to, in opposition to what we see in Europe, where it's all the biggest teams on a continent who have 100 years of history and all of this money going up against each other. I just don't know how I don't know how we get there. I really don't. I wish I had an idea. Go ahead.
Yeah. One thing I would add before I can go is that if you had an MLS side win the CONCACAF Champions League and go to the Club World Cup, and let's just say they win it, even though it's against like maybe Barcelona or whoever puts up their second team, even if they do that, I think if they win the Club World Cup, that could be something that makes that tournament actually mean something, because Europe finally sees, we can't just waltz in and win this competition every time.
Yeah, that would maybe do something if you got a major upset. I mean, we're still waiting for a Mexican team to go win the thing, right? I mean, they go every year. And the Mexican teams, generally speaking, underwhelmed. Appreciate the call. Thanks a lot. Maybe if a Mexican team wins, that does something. I don't know. Let's go to 212. You're on the air.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
it's Washington.
It's Washington. Hey, Washington, what's going on, man? I can't screen the call, so I didn't know it was you. I would have just answered the phone. Hey, Washington, what's going on?
Well, listen, and you kind of already tackled the points that I wanted to cover about the NASL. I think the only way, honestly, the NASL grows is if you remove the New York Cosmos from the NASL. Because right now, you have this huge giant and then like 10 little minnows. You have this huge giant. I think the NASL, I think the Cosmos are the only one that's in a major market. And I don't mean to insult them. I don't know too much about it, but put it this way: it's the only one that I've heard of, right?
Okay, well,
that's been on ESPN or anything like that.
Sure. Well, let's Washington. While you're here, since you brought it up, let's just go down the line, okay, and just take stock of the NASL. And I'm not trying. This is not me throwing shade at the NASL. I'm just talking about what they've got already. Because again, Seamus O'Brien is talking about 18 to 20 teams in 5 years. Right now, they've got the Atlanta Silverbacks. Probably not long for this world, especially considering that Atlanta United's coming into MLS in a couple of seasons. The Carolina Railhawks, which I think are in Raleigh, which I don't think anybody thinks of as a major market, but it's a good-sized market, a second division market, let's be honest. FC Edmonton, Fort Lauderdale, Indy 11, which is a successful team in Indianapolis. That's good. Jacksonville Armada, they've started out fairly well, but they're only a year. This is their first year. Miami FC hasn't started yet. Minnesota United, we know that they're moving to MLS, provided they get their stadium done. The New York Cosmos, who are throwing a shadow over everything else. Ottawa Fury, that's not a major market anybody would think of for MLS, but you never know. I don't know what the size of Ottawa is, honestly. Puerto Rico FC, Carmelo Anthony's team, which hasn't started yet, and will never be an MLS team, let's be honest. San Antonio Scorpions, a team that has outwardly said they would love to be in MLS, and there's a potential ownership change coming for them. And the Tampa Bay Rowdies. They're sort of in the Cosmos level in terms of history, but and Tampa's been an MLS city before, but I don't know where they stand. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 teams, and I'm including the 2 that haven't started yet. They're going to add 7. Right. They're going to add 7 teams. Wait a second. Atlanta's going to go away. They're going to add 8 teams in 5 years. Are you kidding me? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think he was just faking it until he makes it. I don't think that's realistic. I really don't think that's realistic at all. But my thing is, have we seen this before though? With the ABA and the NBA or the AFL and the NFL, what happens is that if that league does grow, eventually it just merges with the bigger league, or it's taken over by the bigger league.
That happens, Washington, if the smaller league proves itself to be a threat to the bigger league. Because the AFL cut into the NFL and they said, okay, now we can't have this. We'll take all your teams. The ABA did the same thing. Although, the ABA was very, if we're talking about a parallel, the ABA was very much in a soccer league type of thing in the situation that they had teams coming and going all over the place, starting, stopping, small budgets. There was a couple of big teams that sort of outshined everybody else. Very much Wild West. That's
but they
where we're
made a
headed.
big enough noise that they got the NBA's
Yes,
attention.
they did.
And
They
I
did.
think if the NASL does grow, if it does grow, all that's going to happen is the MLS is going to take note, and then they're going to take them over or merge or however you want to phrase it. I don't think, unfortunately, I mean, and the way, don't they play like a Mexican style schedule? I think they're broken up, right?
Yes.
They play like a fall and a spring, and they're single table. What if they do grow like that? All that's going to happen is the MLS is going to take them over, and they'll go away, and they'll become a single entity, and they'll become East versus West, and they'll become one whole season. I don't see anything other than that.
And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know. Obviously, there's probably not agreement across the board with ownership groups. Not everybody's going to agree on the same direction for the NASL. But I imagine there's some of them who are thinking, maybe we can get to that level. Maybe I get bought out for double what I paid for this club. That's a standard sort of business mindset, right? I'm not even hating on it, Washington. There are plenty of people who get into sports because, especially when you're talking about a growing sport like soccer, because, hey, this thing I'm buying, it could be worth a lot more in 5 years, and I could sell it and make a ton of cash. Not necessarily, well, we're for the good of the game. We want to create a league that is more true to the world's version of blah, 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 blah.
And I'm with you on that. That's why sometimes when I hear about MLS expansion and things, I really pay attention to the owner groups. Are they businessmen or are they soccer people? Or are they a mix of both? I would much rather have soccer people be in an owner group than just businessmen or businesswomen, because a businesswoman is looking at the bottom line. A soccer person is looking at the art of the sport and the growth of the sport.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I
just got to get going, man. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Washington's calling in. Thanks, Washington. Appreciate the call, man. All right. See you later. Goes to Washington. Good stuff. That's a good place to end a Thursday show. We had a little France. We talked a little NASL. We're going to continue that conversation over on Sirius XM FC 85, by the way. It is channel 85. If you can't find it, it's because it moved. You probably, whatever. If you have a Sirius XM subscription, please be checking us out. We'll be taking phone calls on this topic, continuing that. Certainly, Tim Howard, DeMarcus Beasley called into the U.S. men's national team. Those MLS results last night. San Jose, goddamn, killing Sporting Kansas City. What happened to Sporting last night? Seattle Sounders with a late win in the CCL. Same thing for DC United. A bunch of headlines. We'll talk a bunch of American soccer topics over there, and I'm sure we'll line up a couple of good guests. In fact, I think we've already got somebody who's on the schedule today. Trevor, there's somebody already out there. I just have to look it up because it's already there somewhere. All right, let's wrap this up. Go to backheel.com/store to buy yourself a Soccer Morning mug. Got T-shirts over there as well. Soccer Morning T-shirts are there now. They've moved over to backheel.com. We've also got this shirt that I'm wearing right here, which is the Chuck Blazer Baller T-shirt, which I love. And then we've got a brand new edition. It's a Poku shirt. It's not the Poku party shirt. I think that's still coming. But it is a Poku shirt because we had to get one up there. The man is fantastic. Maybe he's not working hard enough defensively, but otherwise he's fantastic, especially going forward. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks to Jonathan Johnson for his contributions to today's show. Thanks for those of you who called in. And we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. I'm very excited for that. See ya later.